B2B founders, if your business is around 2 to 10 million, you may find yourself stalled out. So if you're running a SaaS company or a boutique consulting company, it's very typical that it's hard to break past this 2 to 10 million dollar a year. And a lot of it has to do with risk and what I call the ROI trap. I'm going to break down the best practices from McKinsey and from my own experience consulting with companies. How do you get out of this risk trap that keeps you blocked at this level? Let's break it down in Loom. So what is this ROI trap? You've probably been here. It's a loop that looks something like this. ROI to investment. This is what feels like a reasonable adult business decision. However, you need to invest to get the ROI. You need to invest to prove the ROI. And so really what you want is certainty. You're hoping for some certainty and this is keeping you trapped in this loop. Fundamentally, there's always a trade-off between risk and reward. And you are always getting returns that are commensurate with the risk that we're taking. And so some actions in business that will help you grow faster require higher risk. And taking the safer option always will have lower returns. And I've learned this running moonshot projects. So in a previous life back in corporate, I ran $250 million projects to launch completely new technology, market it. It was successful. And it was a fantastic lesson in risk and dealing with risk. So I'm going to share some of the lessons I've learned along the way, as well as the best practices that we can see from some McKinsey studies. And let's just ignore Swissair right now while we talk about McKinsey. And let's look at how we can deal with this. So most companies who are at this level, they're really usually stuck in relationship-driven sales. But almost everyone in high-end B2B, they start with relationships because that's a great way. If you're selling $50K, $200K, $1 million contracts, then you're not going to sell that to a stranger, right? So you need to have a relationship, and this is a great way to get started. There's nothing wrong with this. It's a great way to build a business, especially if you're going after enterprise or high-end mid-market, for example. You know, some companies do golf, some companies they go to events and conferences and so forth. And there's also lots of digital marketing things that you can do here to increase the rate of relationships. And that can really help you with high-end deals. And you should do it. If you're not doing outbound, you should. A lot of people already are doing outbound to get to this point. And the key to growing faster is to start selling beyond just relationships. And I won't belabor the point since I've said this before, but we're going after strangers. If we can go after strangers, if we can start adding customers, obviously we can't sell strangers $1 million contract. That's not happening right very quickly. By the time you close the deal, you're not strangers anymore. It's like a 6-month or longer thing. So what really works well is to sell strangers something low risk, something to get your foot in the door and land and expand. And for a lot of businesses, it's very hard to make this leap from relationship to selling to strangers. And that's because they can't do the same stuff. And it feels like a big risk. Maybe you're talking about doing paid ads. Maybe you're talking about doing a different kind of outreach, a different level of effort. And at the end of the day, usually making this jump involves some risk. It involves some cash to spend the money to figure this out. And this is where people get stuck. They're like, hey, we've never done it before, but we want a guarantee that it will absolutely work for us. And there are agencies that do guarantees. We do guarantees if the customer meets the right criteria. But it's not enough because you're still like, but will it work? I've heard this before. And the trick out of this, the trick to succeeding when there's some level of uncertainty is not to plan your way. You cannot plan your way through risk. And this is kind of a safety, like this addiction to uncertainty is actually part of what's keeping you stuck right at this level. You have to embrace a little bit of risk and say, you know what? I'm not going to try to use planning to solve for the uncertain items, which is impossible. But we all kind of do it. You're like, I don't know how to do it, so I'll make a huge project plan. And it just hides the fact that you don't know how certain things are going to go. And this is true, even if the person you're working for has done it hundreds of times. Like we've generated hundreds of millions in pipeline at this point. But for the company, it's new. If it's new to you, that's a risk. And so what does McKinsey say? So they have a great thing about growth amidst uncertainty. And like, what do you do? I'm not going to read you the article. I can link it in this video. It's a great article, but one of the key findings is, well, let me just mark this down, is we have to accept some uncertainty. And honestly, we're doing it right here. As you make this leap This requires accepting uncertainty. There's uncertainty here. Uncertainty. And there's uncertainty. Like when I ran moonshot projects, there was so much uncertainty, right? And so what do you do to mitigate uncertainty? The answer is not project planning. The answer is not project planning or getting other estimates from multiple vendors. The trick is to launch and learn. Launch and learn and have a fixed acceptable amount of risk in terms of cash flow and so forth. And also to give yourself time to actually succeed. And so in this study, Jumpstarting B2B Sales here about uncertainty, some of the findings are that when you're doing this approach of test, fail, learn, adapt, basically do the action to get the information, those companies doing that will grow 300% faster, and they'll start getting results usually in 30 days versus people who are waiting for the criteria. So the way out of this kind of loop, the stall loop, is not to just say, screw it, do it. I don't believe that's like responsible. It's not just screw it, do it. It's that, okay, we're going to break the loop by taking action. We're going to take action, but we're not going to take unrestrained, ridiculous action. It's not, just go ahead and launch an enormous campaign and roll the dice. You take a calculated risk that has enough feedback loop that's quick enough that you can adapt. And that's really the key. So in order to do this, you have to accept the uncertainty. You have to actually launch something. Launch, get feedback, and adapt. And the thing is, every company, we know, you know what you do. My marketing firm, we know what we do. And of course, we start with the best bet that we have going forward. But once we put it out there in the market, we see, okay, looks like maybe we're getting leads are too cheap, for example. It's a real problem. That means the lead quality is low. Okay, we're going to add friction. It looks like people aren't responding to the offer. Okay, we have to change the offer. You have to adapt. And the way to win is to get feedback as fast and as cheap as possible. So the worst way to go about this is say, okay, we're going to assign the project to a company, let them take care of it. Let's see if it works in a quarter. The best way is I'm going to partner with somebody that's going to get feedback weekly, and we're looking, is this making sense? What do we need to do? What do we know about our customers? What do they know about the expertise of that supplier? So this is really the key. The key is just learning faster and saying, look, there is some risk. Now, when people look to sell to strangers and get in front of strangers, that means a few things. High level, you can't sell them the same thing, right? High level, if you're trying to sell strangers and you want to reach them, you're going to use some kind of paid ads. And when you do this, the thing you need to know is you can't advertise your company. This is the biggest mistake. So whatever you do, it's complex. Right now, you have a complex solution. That's solution. You have a complex solution, and you can't advertise a complex solution to strangers. They don't have time. They don't know what you're talking about. So you have to break off a specific outcome, and you have to make them an offer that's low risk and is specific. Has to be specific time, specific price, and specific outcome, right? It just is very well defined. It's low risk, and it has to be the right price. If you don't want to have a long sales cycle, if you say, gosh, I wish my sales cycle was short, okay, do an entry pilot workshop, test, white glove test, something where you're going to get an outcome in a specific risk. And if you charge something like 10 to 50K for this, whoever you're dealing with might be able to approve it themselves. You might not need a long approval process. You'll have a much shorter sales cycle. Deliver on that, you can make money on sale number 2. Or if you're SaaS, your SaaS becomes the continuity offer after that pilot project is complete. So this is what we recommend companies do. And the key is not some buttons or something. The key is, what is this offer, right? What is this? This is the key. Nailing this is the key. And well, what kind of risk does it take to run paid ads? Well, if you're running B2B paid ads, you want to have the cash flow. You want to have the cash flow to invest something in the neighborhood of 5K. You could start at 3, but it's very slow. So if you have cash flow for 5K a month, that's enough speed to get weekly feedback on your funnel, start generating booked appointments for your sales team or for you as a founder. We can scale it up till we can get you out of sales, but that's enough to really get the data, right? And when you're launching an initiative, you want to run it long enough that you can get data, pivot, adapt, and win. And so when people say like, what should, how much would it cost over time, or how much does it scale up? Really, this is like the risk tolerance you need is to be able to say, look, we're going to budget 5K a month to invest in here to prove the ROI, right? To prove the ROI. And then once you have the ROI, great. Now you've you know what it's worth to you. You're going to have, instead of, it's very easy for anyone to rattle off industry benchmarks and say, like, okay, cost per call, everyone knows in B2B, a cost per call is like between $200 and $500. If you're going to like Fortune 10, it might be 5K a call, right? There's a huge range, but most people are in this range. But house numbers and industry benchmarks are not as valuable as your data. And so the key here is you need to get your own data, all the while building pipeline. And then you're going to be able to make your own model and justify it. And so this is what I suggest. If you're ever facing these kinds of questions and you're like, man, we want to do it, but we got to be dead certain it works. This is the wrong mindset. And even in corporate environments, this mindset will lead to big projects. It comes with this thinking like, okay, we're only going to greenlight projects with huge net present value. And one way to get your net present value up is to make the project huge and to hide and just shove risk into the project. And then you have this massive risk nugget, and it looks good on paper, but it's very risky. And so the key is to keep it small, run something like this for a quarter, and you will have your own data. You will be able to get it 100% working by that time. Most companies with a good offer can unlock the funnel, have it be profitable in a quarter. And this is an appropriate level of risk for making that leap from relationship sales to strangers where you're pulling them in with a scalable channel. All right. Hope that helps. And if you want help growing your business, you know where to find me. Just DM me and I'd love to help you. Cheers.